Okay, so I guess we'll dive right into this as we start, and other people are obviously welcome to join us as we go on. But what this is really going to be is a kind of deep dive into how COVID is affecting travel, tourism, and dining industries, what has been happening, and what we expect will happen as we transition into the next normal that's going to happen. So what we're really seeing COVID do is kind of act as this trend accelerator, really pushing traditional businesses into the digital age, whether they like it or not, and also accelerating consumers to be more digitally focused as well. So we can see this through an increase in online auto sales and test drives, the fact that more people than ever are purchasing groceries through an app, or the insanely quick rise of telemedicine. But once consumers really get used to accessing these kinds of services digitally, these industries may find it really hard to go back to those traditional operations. And really, as we move into the next normal, digital acceleration will continue. So as we continue to shelter at home, the at-home economy is definitely on the rise, and we're seeing consumers and business really adapt to this, whether that is through new breeds of expertise-driven influencers like chefs, teachers, barbers, all leveraging a kind of Instagram Live as a service to really promote their products and skills in new ways and capture consumer attention. And then, of course, you've got the cloud raves and virtual parties, of which, of course, a cover fee is still charged for some unknown reason. And if nothing else, we know the home economy is rising when tops are outselling pants, as we've seen since COVID started. After all, who really is wearing pants at home? Now, because everything is online, media consumption is soaring across demographics and across sectors. So media companies are all really trying to quickly pivot and move their content into digital formats, and provide online delivery in an effort to adapt and get in front of as many eyeballs as possible as more and more people spend time on screens. And although event cancellations have caused major disruptions in media production and scheduling, at the moment we haven't seen a huge effect of this, but that will be coming in the next few months. And consumers really seem to be content with kind of just streaming their way through the pandemic. Content streaming is pretty much at nearly double last year's levels, with about 77 year-over-year increase since 2019 during prime time. However, the more that we progress into this, it's becoming more and more obvious that there's no escaping from the economic situation that COVID is really putting on us. So despite a $2 trillion coronavirus stimulus package that the US government passed, it really seems inevitable that we're going to be facing an economic turndown with a potentially very long recovery period, not the V shape that I think a lot of us really hoped for. So 3 million job losses are now 22 million, and the 350 billion for small business funding has just run dry as of yesterday. And one thing that is becoming increasingly apparent is that with all this time at home, consumers are really paying attention to how brands are responding to this crisis. So what a company does or doesn't do during this time will be remembered by consumers, and it will also affect their future purchasing decisions. What they really are wanting to see are brands taking command and really finding solutions to or at the very least helping this COVID pandemic. But now on to more specific travel, tourism, and dining elements. All these industries were among the first industries actually affected by COVID-19, as their primary business model pretty much depends on people not minding being in close contact and in fact actively wanting to be in close contact with other people, which COVID-19 has totally changed. That is no longer the case at all. So currently, there are actually over 80 countries that have restricted travel, everywhere from the US, who's not letting certain people in from specific countries, to Australia and New Zealand, who are not letting anyone in unless they're citizens or permanent residents at all. Just in the US alone, there was a 55% drop in commercial flights in the last week of March when compared to 2019, and this has really continued to drop exponentially. We are already actually seeing the effects of lesser travel on the industry. So smaller airlines around the globe have either completely halted business or are going out of business altogether. So British Airline Fly went out of business in early March, and the US airlines, Compass Airlines and American Eagles Airlines have grounded their operations really as of the first week of April. And the issue with this is they were the main providers for rural and regional travel to a lot of America. And so without that, a lot of places are left with no ability to travel at all. But the airlines are obviously trying to deal with this crisis in a multitude of different ways, mostly looking at for future booking potential. So they're really being a lot more flexible with their refunds and travel vouchers, some of which can extend up until 2021. And on top of that, they're of course adding a lot of additional cleaning, and a lot of airlines are also reducing snack and beverage options and availability in an effort to reduce contact with people. And Delta and America have actually gone an extra mile and reduced their middle seats. So they no longer allow people to purchase that middle seat option, so that even if they get a full flight, which would be at a third less capacity than previously, the people will have an option to be as distant as possible from the person next to them. Another really interesting thing that has been happening in the airline space is Etihad has introduced a new passport scanner that actually detects the temperature, heart rate, and respiratory rate of the person standing in front of it. So really looking at this idea that you will have to be in good health to be able to fly at all, and adding that new layer of privilege into airlines. However, nothing that they're doing is really being able to counteract this anti-travel movement, because no one is literally allowed to move at this point in time, which is why United Airlines officially announced yesterday that the current travel demand is effectively zero and not going anywhere fast. And as a result, we're actually seeing a lot of these passenger planes being used as cargo planes as deliveries continue to be a solid source and need transport. Meanwhile, hotels are continuing to shut down. Many are going bankrupt. Some are furloughing their employees or either laying them off entirely. In China, at the peak of the epidemic, they had about an 8% occupancy rate across the board, and the US is looking at having that a very similar rate, if not lower. So yeah, hotels are really suffering at this point in time. But again, they are really trying to incentivize customers to continue to book future travel possibilities, again, by increasing increasing flexibility through either waiving cancellation or change fees and allowing that to happen up to 24 hours before check-in. So really encouraging people to take that leap, book that holiday, knowing that if things change, they've got the flexibility to either change that or go out. And the CEO of Marriott has actually committed to also taking a $0 salary for the remainder of the year, and all the executives at Marriott have a 50% wage decrease as well. However, none of this is really, again, helping stimulate hotel occupancy and booking rates right now. So what a lot of these hotels are doing, especially in New York, Chicago, San Francisco, and London, is actually working with governments to provide free rooms for first responders, for the homeless population, or people that just want to quarantine away from their families in a safe environment. And again, these aren't being counted as hotel bookings because most of them are free, or the government is paying for it at a very subsidized cost. But what this really is doing is showing hotel consumers that they are being part of that solution, and increasing their relevancy and elevating their brand image. So hand in hand with empty hotels and restricted travel, on top of a stay-at-home order, obviously comes empty tourist spots. So the Las Vegas Strip has literally turned out its lights. Florida Keys is shut down, beaches are closing, iconic landmarks and tourist sites are banned from public access. And even tourism campaigns, including those from Mexico and Australia, have been paused as people desperately try to figure out a way that they can pivot to engage with what is happening right now, and be relevant and sensitive to this current issue.
No questions so far. Good to
Cool. So all of this and more is actually in turn having an effect on the food and dining industry, many of which once relied on tourists and is now forced to cater only to locals and compete with the restaurants that are already locally focused. So in most places around the world, the dining industry was definitely affected first, where restaurants had to originally reduce their capacity, and now they're only allowed to offer delivery and takeout, which has obviously resulted in a 100% decrease in bookings and significantly less business across the board. But it's worth noting that even if restrictions weren't in place, 41% of Americans still report being nervous and worried about going out to eat, so they wouldn't be venturing out too far anyway. And the majority of this nervousness comes from a fear of being around other people or people handling their food, or even like sitting in chairs that people may have infected previously. So restaurants are really having to reinvent themselves to stay afloat and to stay relevant and to stay like in consumer awareness. So to do this, restaurants are switching things up fast. We've got everything. So you've got transforming specialty meals into do-it-yourself kits. So like the Llama Project in New York is offering that. You've got Massimo Bottura, who is a chef at 3-star Michelin restaurant, and he's offering free cooking classes via Instagram Live. And then you've got other restaurants like Petra and The Beast, who are totally reimagining and recreating their menus to be specifically designed to actually taste good and hold their consistency after at least a 30-minute wait and travel time. So really catering to that new delivery option. It's going crazy when even bubble tea is going do-it-yourself, with milk and tea selling do-it-yourself boba kits. The other thing that restaurants are really looking into is leveraging their supply chains, especially for essential items. And this is important because their supply chains are often very different to those that come from grocery stores. And by leveraging them and supporting them throughout this time, it means that when restrictions do lift and they can open at a larger capacity, those supply chains aren't broken and they're still there, so they can really turn up that production as fast as possible. So what we're seeing here is actually like a promotional tactic. So a free roll of toilet paper with a fish fry from Denny's. But other restaurants are also offering masks, water bottles, gloves, and other essential items that people are often finding it hard to purchase. Still, other restaurants have actually gone like the further and really adopted and totally pivoted their restaurants from a restaurant and into a local market or grocery store, essentially turning themselves into an essential business. So we've got Leon in the UK that's doing this. Panera has opened Panera Groceries, and even OpenTable, the restaurant reservation app, has pivoted to groceries, as it now provides reservations for grocery store shopping. So instead of lining up outside Whole Foods, you can actually reserve a place in line and just rock up and go in when it's your turn. And then there are chefs and restaurants going in the complete other direction and actually leaning into COVID and creating COVID-themed foods. So we've got everything from toilet paper cakes to virus cell chocolates, and even the Corona burger, which is being offered by Hoang Tong in Hanoi. And it's all meant to be reflective of the virus's appearance. And this is in an attempt to really go viral and access a larger audience share and encourage people to order from them, especially as millions of people are now spending a lot more time on social media than they were previously. But the majority of restaurants have simply pivoted to takeout, and businesses are there to help. So it is really interesting to see how everyone is stepping up to the plate to support different industries. So Charlie, for example, has offered restaurants a no-cost startup package, specifically to help dine-in restaurant establishments quickly shift their business into delivery-focused models. And on top of that, they've actually raised almost $6 million to support the restaurants during the time of transition, and to make sure that they can keep afloat while they're working this out. And even Instagram is getting into the game. So they've created a new element where business stickers can now be put on stories, and those stickers will lead directly back to websites that either allow food delivery or provide, you can order gift cards to support those restaurants at a time of need. So elevating social commerce in a new and different way. But as people really get used to delivery, we can expect to see food delivery remain higher than pre-COVID times, as people really get used to the convenience of not leaving the house for something as simple as food. And according to China Cuisine Association, at the end of March, food deliveries still accounted for over 60% of business, where before the outbreak it was only 10 to 15. And at the end of March, China was lifting those lockdowns, and people were allowed to go like out and about on the street. A lot easier. However, despite all this rapid transformation, it's still not quite enough for the dining industry. And this is in huge part due to the fact that consumers are actually stockpiling groceries. And once they've bought the groceries, they actually have to use them, which means that we're seeing a huge increase in home cooking, both to save money in the long term and also to have more control over personal safety through limited interaction with others. So grocery foods are definitely among the top growing categories currently, and some stores are actually saying that they're being totally sold out of flour due to a very strong uptick of social baking that we're seeing. Apparently everyone and their dog is currently making bread. So if you're on the keto diet, maybe just take a break for now. But more than that, this upsurge of cooking is likely to result in changing habits for future dining and cooking occasions, especially as we talk to consumers who have never needed or wanted to learn to cook before and now finding it a necessity, and potentially also, experiencing that it's not as bad as they had in mind. And so this is a habit that is probably definitely going to stick as we go and transfer into the next normal. So we can really expect to see less dining after COVID, probably more luxury dining and less fast casual dining. But it's also important to know that, like, even when markets reopen, for people to dine out, they're actively going to want to avoid crowded places, which means, like, in New York, you see tables, 2-3 inches apart from each other. That's just not going to be acceptable anymore. And we're going to see expectations for increased safety measures, including capacity reduction and increased space between tables, so that consumers feel like they are safer when they go out and dine. And this will be alongside, the expectation of gloves, masks, contactless payment options, again, limiting that exposure to people. And this will also lead to what is probably going to be among some of the most biggest and impactful changes, and is something that we're definitely seeing across industry, not just in dining, but it's this accelerated use of robotics and automation, which was already a trend that was going in the dining industry, but more as a novelty. And we're likely to see this uptick as an essential aspect of investment as we move forward. So especially in casual and fast dining, where robot baristas and self-ordering kiosks are already becoming the norm, we're also going to see delivery robots for food delivery, both within the restaurant and from restaurants to people's houses. So Yunji Robotics in Beijing, they make delivery robots, and they've seen an increased distribution since the virus, in the wake of the virus, essentially. So after restrictions were lifted, these things are coming into play as restaurants and businesses really kind of get prepared for a potential next spike. And then more locally, we've also got Cali Group, which make Cali Burger, and they've announced that they're actually expanding their use of kitchen automation from Miso Robotics, Inc., which will include entry screening systems, contactless ordering and payment, and all of this. Oh, and of course their flippy burger robot. And all of this is in an effort to minimize employee and customer exposure to COVID-19, which is fantastic. However, we know that once COVID-19 is over, that investment isn't just going to go away, and it will likely increase. So it's something that we should definitely be aware of moving forward. However, at the end of the day, there's still a lot of restaurants and bars that unfortunately have decided that it is just better for them to close up shop. So the UBS actually forecasts that over 200,000 restaurants, almost 20% of US restaurants, will permanently shutter due to this outbreak, and that is across the country. It's not city or state dependent. So there will definitely be a large upheaval in the restaurant industry as to who can survive this.
All right, we do have one question. What research are you seeing in the RV industry?
In the what industry, sorry?
RV, so like campers, recreational vehicles.
For dining, nothing specifically.
No, so I think it was from the last section.
I know I haven't seen anything specific to RV, but like later on, I do touch on camping. Is definitely going up as a consumer product. So a lot of people are buying camping gear, and I assume that they plan to use it after COVID is over. But as for RV, yeah. I can't say I've seen anything specific at this point.
I haven't seen anything specific either, although we are anticipating domestic travel will be very popular in the coming year. And RVs are, of course, a great way to stay socially distant while still traveling around the country. So I would be optimistic for RV numbers, although we haven't seen any data as of.
However, there is definitely reports that road trips as a whole will go up, and I'm sure RV would factor into that.
Yep, good point.
Okay, so armchair tourism is increasing, which isn't surprising because boredom rates are soaring. And this is really coming as brands actively engage audience with culture, travel, and tourism in new ways because they've had to pivot these in-person experiences into digital and do it convincingly. But 80% of people are really reporting that they're planning, thinking, dreaming, essentially reveling about the possibility of traveling again. And 42% of people have actually said that they want to see advertising for travel and tourism to really help them get in the mindset of like escapism and remind them that this is going to end at some point in time. But it is important for brands to be careful about how they advertise and promote, as at this point in time that we do need to address and accommodate any COVID sensitivities. So one of the main things that we've seen is a huge spike in virtual museums and art galleries. It seems that every publication I've been reading has had an article about at least once. So a while ago, Google Arts and Culture teamed up with about 2,500 museums and art galleries around the world in order to bring these virtual tours to life. And they haven't been very well used. Like there hasn't been a huge amount of interest until now, where the interest rates and Google searches went from 0 to 100. You've got pretty much everything on offer here, from the Met to the MoMA, the Louvre, the British Museum in London. Pretty much everything is on the cards. And galleries that didn't have this partnership with Google Arts and Culture are still creating their own. Other galleries are adding aspects, exhibitions that hadn't been captured, either just as photos or as like live tours, like singularly by curators. They're really vamping into this virtual experience. Another easily, and at this point, almost overused media element is definitely the live streams that we're seeing. They are everywhere for everything. So around the world, specifically, we've got aquariums and zoos that are offering live video footage. So both of like general enclosures that are always on or specific animals. And there's a lot of zoos that are really trying to cater to that parental, offering kids distraction so parents can work. So Cincinnati, Zoo introduced a Facebook Live show called Home Safari, and that airs like every day at 3 p.m. So really kind of using it as an actual show, which essentially is a live stream of a different animal and enclosure, and is accompanied by educational activities that are designed for children to do, and so they can be distracted and educated at the same time. You also see tourist cities like Sydney, Australia, Tokyo in Japan, making live streams of specific iconic tourist shots. So like the Harbour Bridge, for example. So that's available for anyone just to tune in and I guess kind of to see what's going on at that particular spot and experience, at least in the best way that they can, a cultural attraction. And then you've also got other cultural events like Broadway and concerts that are using live streaming or pre-recording of live streams to enable like audiences to still access their elements as well. And while zoos and concerts have been using live streaming like for content creation and engagement, live streaming is definitely still working as a tactic to actually boost sales. So what we're seeing in South Africa is a huge rise in the virtual safari, and that's actually been directly linked to an increase in engagement overall, but also bookings for the 2021 season. So obviously that's people are thinking that's far enough in the future that they'll be safe to do that. But what is really interesting as well for the safari specifically is because so much of like the reason that they exist is for tourism, but also for conservation. Like at the end of the day, a lot of these safaris are committed to protecting the wildlife, and having these now global platforms with a hugely engaged audience allows them to really elevate and educate that conservation awareness message. And then you've got a lot of the, experience booking tools. So Vaeda, for example, is doing a fantastic job at kind of combining everything I've talked about already into a single platform, and then of course adding their own elements to it as well. So they're actually working directly with key tourism establishments around the world that they already have relationships with to create this Roam from Home campaign. And it's fantastic because it means that everything is in one place. It's all sorted via either interests. So, if you're interested in dining, if you're interested in culture, if you're interested in sightseeing, and then you can also sort it by countries as well. It is a mix of paid and free offers. However, what is really fantastic and is great for Vaeda to be doing is that everything that is paid goes directly to the operator. So Vaeda takes no cut out of these paid segments. And it really allows consumers the opportunity to immerse themselves in something that is culturally relevant, interesting, and engaging for them, while supporting the people that actually put them on and make this possible as well. And because 80% of those are small businesses, this is a really amazing thing that Vaeda is making accessible. And Airbnb also has a similar offering where they've gone from like their experiences to online experiences. So it's very similar, but much more localized. You're also seeing a lot of national tourism boards get on board with this virtual experiences as well. So they're really looking at creating new types of campaigns to provide a literal taste of culture that keeps audiences engaged and makes them want to go out and like, that is where I want to be next, kind of experience it for real. So the majority of these are all like accessible virtual events, and they're designed, a lot of them are actually designed to bring people together. So you've got Jamaica's Escape to Jamaica series. Japan's creating a 360 virtual tour. St. Lucia is doing twice weekly 7-minute videos that each look at a new scene from their beautiful nation. And they're really, tourism boards and offices are really leveraging this increased content consumption via social media to bring their country, into people's homes. But one of the ones I really love is the US Virgin Islands. So their Depot of Tourism is actually celebrating Carnival virtually. So Carnival is meant to go from April 3rd to May 4th. And what they've done is they've kept a lot of those events, or they've tried to capture the essence of those events and turn them into virtual experiences that people can tune into, fully encouraging people to dress up, fully encouraging like interaction between people through the live events as well. And that has been actually very successful. On a slightly different tune, you've got like Marriott, and they're still trying to find ways to tap into consumers at home via digital means. So they've actually partnered with Unsplash, which is a free photo website, and any photo that is tagged with either Zoom, Relax, or Calm will come up with the Marriott logo, as Marriott has committed to sponsor this. And if we notice that they're very we will travel again, they're not promoting people to travel now, they're encouraging people to be safe, and it's definitely a future option. This is actually probably one of my favorite things that I have personally seen, is this ability to merge both the online and the offline together. So some hotels are offering these super bougie luxury COVID getaways that allow people to escape from the madness. But this is it's a much more realistic and affordable option, and it's being offered by a new startup called Home Sweet Home in Amsterdam. And what they really are trying to do is bring the hotel to the consumer through a complete on and offline experience for Easter weekend, which went off pretty much without a hitch and was hugely successful. So what they do is actually partner with local entrepreneurs, restaurants, artists to elevate the ultimate staycation. You check in online, you get a curated, locally sourced welcome box. They give you live entertainment, they give you a concierge, and it's all done within the home. So again, kind of fulfilling that want of being safe and not interacting with people, but still treating yourself and engaging with what is going on outside. And we really expect these digital pivots will change how we actually think and interact with culture. So we've now got digital wanderlust and on-demand access to global culture whenever we want it, and curated experiences, and they're all available to us from our home. So it's extremely likely that as consumers continue to accept it and anticipate this type of digital immersion, it will either be factored into their travel decisions as research, or as a possible substitute for a real world experience. And as VR headsets continue to rise as people are locked down, and the digital cultural world really accelerates further, this could really open a branch of new world opportunities within the industry. And it is very interesting as well that while people aren't actually at tourist spots at this point in time, tourist operators are actually putting in place overcrowding measures. So, when restrictions lift, they will be able to make sure that only certain amounts of people are allowed in at once. And these digital channels will still allow that global audience reach and access, even though the actual physical places may be shut off from the world for a little while longer.
We do have two questions, although one of them is about theme parks, so I think we'll let that sit until after this next section.
Sure.
The first question is, what countries are we allowed to travel to right now? Is there a source to check who is lifting the travel restrictions?
I don't know of one. I was looking at one earlier today. Over 185 countries have been affected by COVID, and most of them have created some form of border control, whether that is just a mandatory quarantine period or whether that is total inaccessibility to, unless you're a citizen or something. I will find it and make sure that it's posted either in this chat afterwards, because something definitely exists. I just can't recall off the top of my head.
So while you were talking, I actually did some quick research and found a couple of things. There is a CDC page that basically tells you visiting which countries would prevent you from returning to the US right now. And then the New York Times has a very good list of all of the country by country travel restrictions and who's not letting who into their country at the moment.
I think
so
I
just dropped
thinking
both
of the
of those
New York
into
Times.
Yeah. Yep. Cool. And then I see this theme park question, but we'll hold it until after this section, and we can, because I think it will probably be answered.
Cool. Sorry, one sec. Okay, so theme parks. Theme parks are pretty much they're hitting pause on all their operations, but I don't know about you guys, but every day I feel like I'm in a theme park because I am on an emotional roller coaster, going through the constant ups and downs. But unfortunately, yeah, around the world, theme parks are closed and worlds are pretty much all closed. You've got everything from Disney to Universal. You've got Six Flags and SeaWorlds. And it's gotten to the extent that after a very ambitious month-long close down by Disney, which they have since extended indefinitely, they're now actually offering refunds to all of their annual pass holders, which is definitely indicative of where they think they are. And considering that new research from Harvard has recently come out that's saying we may need to do at least some sort of social distancing procedures until 2022, theme parks are really going to have to look at different ways to kind of recapture that magic for their guests, especially if these social distancing guidelines continue to go on for the long haul. And in some ways, they're already trying to do that. So treats and sugar fixes seem to be the answer, at least for the moment. So Disney's been releasing a bunch of recipes that have been specific to their park. So you've got Churro Bites, Toy Story Land grilled cheese, and their famous Dole Whip, which has been currently doing a viral round on social media as to how to make it. But what's really interesting is as theme parks close up shop, gaming is definitely increasing, and it's been a medium that has seen some of the highest increase and additional new audiences being added as well through this chaotic time. And it's really engaging because it's offering new audiences into immersive worlds, interactive activities, favorite characters and locations, which, does it remind you of anything? It really has the potential to kind of transform or to offer a digital version of a theme park in many ways. So we're seeing this already an increase in the gaming and virtual world engagement has actually accelerated the amount of events that are being hosted in there and the amount of brands that are doing interactions with it. And as we can see here, so Deadpool came to Fortnite. And when it was released, it was accompanied by a series of, Deadpool-specific challenges that people had to complete, a Deadpool Battle Pass exclusive, and specific items like skins and accessories that people could dress their virtual avatars up in, and even a yacht party in a specific location that people had to find and join. But it heightens engagement with fan favorite characters through a new kind of interactive means, and really can create a sort of digital theme park of sorts, but with the added benefit of no line. And another way that we're seeing these virtual worlds really being used is to actually offer substitutions for real world locations. So what we're looking at right now is a recreation of Minecraft recreation of UPenn, the University of Pennsylvania. And students here have actually taken the initiative to rebuild the entire campus on Minecraft. And they've inspired other students from other universities to also build it on the server, and they're going to communicate and try and have a kind of, inter-school challenges and games. And also they're looking into actually hosting traditional spring activities on the server. So, using these digital proxies as a way to still definitely engage with the real world and have a sense of attachment there. And then we're also seeing events taking place on newer platforms like Animal Crossing as well as increased access to skins and accessories and essentially all the things that you can dress your avatars up as luxury fashion designers continue to try and tap into this as well. So there's an unlimited possibility of both creative from the brand side, but also allowing your consumers to be creative and really tapping into that democratized creativity aspect that we're seeing as a trend.
So I think you already answered this, but the question related to theme parks was, have you seen any stats or predictions regarding theme parks? How likely are they to reopen, and will consumers feel safe enough to attend? So I think you talked about the schedule. I don't know if you have any thoughts on consumers feeling safe enough to attend.
Yeah, I would predict that especially there would be a definite lag in terms of consumers wanting and feeling safe. to go back to theme parks unless, you know, there were specific, you know, theme parks like limited their capacity, and that would have to be very, very significantly in order to continue to capture that intention and make them feel safe. One interesting thing that I did note, and this was true as of, I think, 2 weeks ago, it may have changed now, but the Universal Epic universe that was being built hasn't stopped being built. So they're still going ahead of that, and they've still got a 2023 opening date, but all other construction for other theme parks have stopped, including, I think it was the Avengers portion as well. And that in itself is going to delay people coming back because there won't be as many new things to see and do. And so there's not that additional element to encourage consumers to go back straight away. Cool. Okay, well, what we've kind of looked at up till this point is current behaviors and what's really happening and, like, you know, potential future around that. But this next section is looking more at what will happen when restrictions, or what we predict will happen when restrictions actually are lifted. So whether that be at the end of May, whether that be at the end of December, whether that be in 2021. At this point, we're not quite sure. But one thing does seem to be absolute is that domestic travel and tourism will be the first to come back on track, and will hopefully save the industry in a lot of ways. Sorry. One of the main reasons for this is the fact that countries can control the COVID spread by locking down, whether that be states, by locking down borders, sorry, whether that be states, whether that be entire countries. And so through domestic travel, consumers will still be able to fulfill the urge to go and travel, go and escape, go and do other stuff, but in a much more domestic sense, and it comes with that element of control by governments, less so than consumers. But experts really predict that travel can take anywhere between 10 months and 5 years to get back to the level that they were at. So currently, the way that we're predicting the future of travel and tourism to go after COVID is kind of in one of two ways. And we will probably actually see both of them, but they'll differ across demographics and they'll differ across locations. So first is people are going to be increasingly cautious of crowded places for a while, and overall that will probably impact the desire to go outside and participate in travel and tourism again. However, when it does, what we will see is private house rentals going up, private cabanas and resorts going up, and private tours, essentially anything that they can do to control their own personal safety. But this will definitely come after a lag in travel and tourism, where the second option that we're likely to see is people wanting to escape immediately and not really caring what else is happening at the point in time. So there will only be consumed thoughts of wanting to leave isolation, but what the likelihood of the effect of this will be is this is the kind of behavior that will cause increased spikes, and we're likely to see more infection rates for the populations that end up doing this, which will overall kind of bring everything back down and make people much more hesitant as they go outside the next time that restrictions are lifted. So yeah, at this point in time, we'll probably end up seeing both, but they'll be very different. But the good thing that we are seeing is in countries that have actually already kind of on the have had their peak, are coming out of it now. So looking at China, looking at South Korea. So the ones that are into recovery, they are seeing a raise in local tourism. So hotel bookings in China have increased by 40% in the first week of March compared to February. Peak daily flights rose by 230%, and this has been increasingly rising throughout as well. So also internal tourism surveys by Chinese residents indicate that China can plan to have domestic tourism recovery at 70% in the next 6 months, which is really positive. And then Also at South Korea, domestic searches and bookings rose over March, and check-in dates at hotels actually increased for the next 2 months, so April and May, which is looking really positive. And domestic searches for hotels were back at 2009 levels at the start of March. Sorry, 2019 levels at the start of March. So there definitely is, the capacity for this to increase fairly quickly, looking at domestic tourism. However, we do have to be careful that China and South Korea were two of the more, they had harsher, stricter lockdowns and better overall processes in terms of dealing with COVID-19. And so these are probably going to be best case scenarios for the US, who had a very different approach. And as Spain and Italy continue to kind of come out of their peaks at the moment, how those countries respond is probably going to be more in tune to what the US can really expect to look like for their own domestic tourism aspects. However, when the US does reopen and people really start to move around again, we fully intend to see an acceleration for local travel and tourism. So not just domestic as the whole of the US, but much more local, much more city focused, or at least state focused, as people are probably going to stick to home as close as possible, as things still are a little bit uncertain, not wanting to be locked down in a place that they can't get out of. But both localized and domestic tourism will definitely see an increase, although people will probably opt to stay for more shorter stays and probably within driving distance. So we expect road trips to go up significantly, as well as camping gear and these rural areas that once again you can't essentially you've got less access to people, which makes people feel safer. And then in some cases, the road trips will definitely go up because as rural and regional airlines continue to be grounded, there will literally be no other way to get to or from some places. But depending on how international countries also choose to enforce their own social distancing guidelines will directly affect how domestic tourism ends up being accelerated in the US. Will our residents be able to leave? We're not quite sure, because at the moment everything varies so wildly from country to country. And as waves of infections are expected after this initial peak, it will be unsurprising if countries continue to limit flights, mandatory tests, or even mandatory quarantine. So if you're going for a 5-day vacation and you have a 14-day mandatory quarantine when you get there at an airport hotel, you're probably not going to go to that place, which will definitely increase the rise of domestic tourism, because people will be more aware of the limitations that they have. And we definitely expect to see these spikes regardless, as we've seen them in China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. So these how countries choose to really continue this and manage this will definitely impact the tourism industry. But also the other thing is that we fully expect to see in airports and in busy locations, both to accommodate and ease consumer mindset and to make things, I guess, just a little bit easier, is the acceleration of contactless scanners for passports, for passports and security machines, immigration, all of these things that can be automated, streamlined, and again, reduce human contact and reduce that wait. If you can create a steady stream of people going through a crowded place like an airport, you're much more likely to get people back in there quicker than a stop-start way that the airports are currently run. However, on the bright side, while domestic travel is expected to obviously bounce back sooner than international travel is definitely not off the cards at all. So hotels in the Maldives are seeing searches for June and a huge uptick in searches for Q1 of 2021. Most of these searches seem to be coming from inside the US, which really indicates that they expect that they will be able to travel and that they do really want to travel as soon as they can. Sorry.
We do have a question. Do you think things like Clear will increase because they don't have to use IDs and can use biometrics like scanning your eyes for security?
Clear is the like fast paced thing to get through the airport, right? Like they give you a security check. Yeah. Yes, I really do. I think that will be almost essential, and I think people will actually be willing to pay a premium for that they might not have been willing to pay before, as long as it can be guaranteed that it will get them through quicker and with less human interaction. If they pay a premium for something like that and it doesn't fulfill what they want because everyone's using it, then that's going to be a problem. So they're just going to have to, those kind of systems are really going to have to figure out the supply and demand there. Okay, so overall, like the uncertainty of this pandemic plus all these sudden shifts in behavior means that people are changing habits and expectations extremely fast. And some of these things are definitely going to stick, if not forever, then definitely for the interim. And one of these things is business trips will take a huge hit. So Skiff Summit in March did polls of 1,000 business travel professionals that revealed that they anticipate only a 23% of businesses to consider 2021 travel at all. Instead, pivoting towards virtual meetings and virtual conferences. And the Skiff CEO has actually elevated that and stating he doesn't expect business travel to ever reach pre-COVID levels again. So essentially, business travel has peaked. There's a real possibility that business travel has peaked, and airlines are going to have to figure out a new way to get the profit that they've been seeing from that element of travel in different ways. Business travel will also further be affected, and the hospitality industry in general will further be affected depending on the success of virtual and digital conferences. So as brands are opting in to more virtual conferences instead of going out and setting up, depending on the success of this, they're likely to continue this going forward, especially if it reduces costs while retaining attention. We're also likely to see the staying of flexible cancellation policies. So, flexible cancellation, convenient contact options, and just general direct access to brands within these industries should probably be a norm until at least that there's a vaccination, and probably ongoing after that, as consumers are getting used to, being able to have that flexibility and that freedom to kind of make these decisions and keep changing it easily. So similar to how increased discounts on clothing can help develop a discount mindset where people won't buy a fully priced item of clothing, increased flexibility could, within travel and tourism, could have a similar type of mindset where they won't buy it if there's no flexible options at all. And mainly, this has been alluded to throughout the entire presentation, is that people will really want their own personal space. They will actively avoid crowds, whether that's at a tourist attraction, whether that's at a restaurant, whether that's in an airport. And the more time that is spent in this intermission of social distancing, where people are allowed to be out and about, but having to maintain space, and space is required, and businesses are allowing that to happen, the more likely people will never again be content to be squashed in to any area again, especially if they have to pay for it. There'll also be an increased focus on local, so local specifically over domestic, so local travel destinations, local businesses, local restaurants, and especially because you can now have access to the global culture digitally, you can still kind of have your cake and eat it too, where you can access global culture but participate and really support your local areas as well. And finally, consumers are definitely getting used to and starting to expect on-demand delivery and digital experience options across the board. So what has happened during this time is people have been able to have a much broader access to a much broader spectrum of products, of culture, of classes, and they don't even have to leave the house to do it. And this kind of convenience will be expected almost as a given moving forward as the at-home economy continues to rise and becomes a bit more of a norm. So it really, in summary, the next normal is looking like brands should definitely look to digital and on-demand options to bring experiences to life, ideally like in new ways, to both increase connection and communication with consumers at this point in time, but also going beyond it. Brands should be leaning into domestic tourism as restrictions lessen, and realize that consumers may be more hesitant about flying and being around people. So I've also got upgrades for fast passes, streamline travel, give them the ability to skip the lines and move forward easily. Will be almost an expectation with travel options, and people will be more willing to pay the premium that comes with it. So consumers are also going to have an increased ability to cook coming out of this, which means dining will definitely be more of a luxury, more of an occasion, and the fast casual places will probably be a little less relevant. But what is definitely interesting to note is restaurants have emerged to be more than just a place that people can go and eat. So kind of leaning into this idea that they can provide consumers with more than just a meal, and different kinds of experiences that they will value just as much, to whether that be in ingredients, classes, demonstrations, or something entirely different. And finally, it is likely that when this all kind of blows over in a much more totally blanking on the word, and I apologize. Like when this blows over in a much more permanent way. So looking at like when we potentially have a vaccination for this, international travel will surge. You'll have had people caught inside and restricted for months at a time, and they will know exactly what they want, and they will have planned out this, once in a lifetime travel opportunity. And so brands really need to be ready to meet that demand when it does finally happen. Thank you.
Great. Any final questions? All right, then. Thanks, everyone, for joining.